Welcome to the Couch Potato Diary Ultimate Baseball Preview, a look at all of the episodes from this year's baseball preview. Peter is still in Japan, so this AI intro will have to do. Enjoy.
So, the Toronto Blue Jays and Vlad Guerrero Jr. Have not come to terms by the time Vlad's deadline has come and gone. And Toxic in the chat just starts off with Blue Jays LOL, which is how the rest of Major League Baseball is feeling, and disappointed but not surprised, which is how the Toronto Blue Jays fan base is feeling. And we kind of knew that this was probably going to happen, but it is still a devastating development for the Blue Jays. And it's one thing we have talked about here before. This team can't let this guy go. He is a legit franchise player, a face of the franchise, and a player that this fan base and country has a real connection with. And that is something that I think Atkins and Shapiro have some struggles with, because it can be a bit of a double-edged sword. It's great to talk up like, hey, we are the team of a country. An entire country is behind us, and when we get going, boy, you can feel that. But on the other end, this country, especially when it comes to not hockey guys, have a real connection with players that are even loosely associated with the country of Canada, right? Like Stephen Ames just moved here and we were like, dog, that's our guy. Let's go. You know, and like Freddie Freeman, his mom was Canadian. So you know what? I'm going to play for Canada at the World Baseball Classic. It's our dude hitting grand slams against the Yankees in the World Series. Canadian, kind of, but Canadian. And Vladdy, like his dad is a legend in Canada. He is, Vlad himself is born in Canada, and he's been in this organization for a really, really long time. And so you can talk up we're Canada's team, and that's great. But now the Canadian fan base is pissed because you might be letting one of our guys go. Again, very loosely associated one of our guys, but still one of our guys go. And like we were getting updates on this kid's journey the entire way through the minors. Sportsnet's running highlights. Anytime he is launching a 500 mile per hour or 500 foot missile into the stratosphere, we're getting updates on this guy throughout it. And then he comes to the big leagues and it's exciting. But even remember back then, we were excited about his debut, but you know what? We're going to wait it a little. We're going to kick the guy. You know, he's just not ready yet. And then, to be fair, maybe he wasn't totally ready. But it feels like this has been mishandled at every turn. And you can't let that guy leave. And right now, the Blue Jays have as good a chance of signing him as 29 other teams. And the thing that everyone feels right now is a lot of frustration. No one feels confident. And that is a sign of what this front office has done with this baseball team. There is not one person in the fan base right now that is saying, don't worry, everyone. These guys will get the job done. No one's saying that. Vladdy's saying now they're going to have to beat 29 other teams. Scares the hell out of a fan base that has come in second place to Ohtani, Soto, Burns, Sasaki. They were even in on Freddie Freeman and didn't get him. This team has come up short and a lot of guys. And so now the real feeling around this fan base is, okay, yeah, can't wait to see who the Blue Jays come in second to in this one before Vlad Guerrero eventually signs with the Mets or the Dodgers or the Yankees or the Red Sox or whoever it may be. All of it just feels so devastating right now. And there is, I can't remember an approval rating of a front office being so low. And the Blue Jays have had some rough ones, right? Gordash did not make, he did not shower himself in glory, we'll say, with a lot of the moves that he made, trading David Wells for an injured pitcher and whatnot. JP Ricciardi, there was the rebuild and all of that. At least there was a direction there, but it was there was a rebuild, and it turned out that the way they were going to come out of the rebuild is just, now we're going to have low money and we're going to sign a bunch of guys and trade for Troy Glaus and do all those things, but we don't need to go back over that. And then Alex Anthopoulos was our guy, and he was finally committed to bringing a winner to this this team in this country. And now you have these guys, and no one believes that these guys can get the job done. And Atkins, the less he talks, the better. He comes across as so smarmy and so know-it-all and just like, oh, well, you need to get a good value. And like, he talks to everyone like he is the smartest guy in the room, which, I mean, the amount of times he has come in second place and him still thinking that he is the smartest guy in the room is certainly an argument against participation trophies. But it is a very frustrating spot that the Blue Jays are in right now. And this would be the everlasting legacy of the Shapiro-Atkins group, right? It is constantly coming up short. They are a laughing stock right now, and that goes 10x with Vladdy signing elsewhere, right? So like you listen to some other podcasts and like the Jays don't get Sasaki and Jeff Passan's like, I'm so sorry, Blue Jays fans. I listened to the round table on the Athletic Baseball Show, and they're openly mocking the Blue Jays for trying to go after some of these guys while also talking about how other teams need to spend. And the Blue Jays, like, it's just, they're always in on these guys and it's right to the end and then they don't get it. And then a lot of us, oh man, it's this, that, and the other thing. And that podcast is actually nice because they'll go, yeah, why would they? This team isn't very good. And all of this is a showcase of what Shapiro and Atkins have done. If Vladdy leaves, smart money would suggest that whatever team he signs with, that will be the one that he is remembered with. Not the team that he has such a tie to, the country of, not the team that he signed with as a teenager, because they have absolutely failed him in Toronto. They failed to build around him. They failed to get him to this team to the levels that he deserves to be at. If he leaves Toronto, it is going to be oh dang, I forgot that Joe Carter started with the Cubs. I forgot that Sammy Sosa started with the Texas. I forgot I forgot Brett Favre started with the Atlanta Falcons. That's what the Blue Jays will be in the Vlad Guerrero Jr. story. Not well, he was a Blue Jay, and boy, they tried. They really did. And then he left, and he won 3 World Series with the Boston Red Sox. But no, he's a Blue Jay. No. No, the Blue Jays are going to be a footnote in any conversation around Vlad Guerrero Jr. or honestly of this era. They have been remarkably unrememberable, non-memorable, unmemorable, whatever you want to say. There's the whole Atkins Shapiro era has been so forgettable that it really is such a disappointment when it was supposed to be the key era. And I couldn't imagine this. If when Vlad and Bo come up, and there's the other ones too, right? Gurriel and Biggio, and they have Teoscar that they absolutely fleeced the Houston Astros for in that trade with Francisco Liriano. When those guys came in, and they're all on like their entry-level rookie base, whatever you call it in baseball, if I would have gone back to myself then and said, hey, just so you know, this team's not going to win a playoff game. Forget round. Game. Not going to win a playoff game. And Vlad's probably going to leave, having not won any of that. Oh, okay, well, at least we have... Oh, no. By the way, Kevin's not there anymore. Gurriel isn't there. They traded Gurriel and the best catching prospect. You're not going to know him yet, but best catching prospect. Traded him for a defensive center fielder who can't really hit, but does hit sometimes, but has a obvious weakness that and the entirety of Major League Baseball knows about. And Teoscar's gone. They traded him for a middle reliever. Like, it's astonishing that they had high-level players on entry-level deals and did nothing around them. It is... I just can't imagine this amount of failure being okay. And it is why I am stunned that Atkins is the one being in these negotiations working with this. Like, I can see the argument in keeping Shapiro around, right? Like, he redesigned the Rogers Center, he rebuilt the Dunedin facilities, and by all accounts, all of that did an awesome job. Also, presidents tend to get more than one GM. There's no argument for keeping Atkins around. The big league team is average, despite spending the fifth most amount, on salary. The farm system is in shambles. Their draft and development system is non-existent. This team, if Vlad leaves, there's nothing. There is absolutely nothing. And yeah, you're right, like rebuilt the stadium, but you let Vlad go. Maybe you're not getting the big investment in brand new jersey sales that you would have if a Shohei or a Soto would have signed here. But we've all lived through the Blue Jays being irrelevant. And like it is kind of interesting to think about because like from 2015 on, this team at least has been in the public discussion in the summer, right? Like the Rogers Center, it's not always full, but there's some people. Go back and watch pre 2015, right? Like go back and watch. We've talked about it before. Carlos Delgado hitting home runs into entire empty sections. Vernon Wells doing the set, making leaping catches in front of, well, the front row's full. And then after that, there's nothing there. Like this team, when it's irrelevant, it is really quiet around that ballpark and it gets real empty real quick. And so, yeah, by all means, like try to, oh, well, we come up with a number that we think is fair and a good risk on both sides. The risk on Vlad's side is sticking around with these assholes running this team. Like it is in such a dire situation right now. With almost any other front office, I would be saying there's still a chance. But it really doesn't feel like it. It really feels like Vlad's about to leave. And certainly Bo's about to leave. They haven't even talked to the guy yet. And his contract is up. Because they've been so busy lowballing Vlad Guerrero Jr. that they haven't even come up with the low number that they're going to try to sign Bo Bichette for. And so now the next question is, what do you do? Because this is a team that fancies itself a competitor. And like they went out, they signed Santander. They didn't bring in Max Scherzer so that they can trade Vlad for 4 prospects at the deadline. They brought in Max Scherzer so that they can maybe win a playoff game once. You don't do that without Vlad. We've talked about this team sucks without Vlad. This team barely doesn't suck with Vlad. With those guys gone, there's nothing here. And so if they are miles ahead of everyone at the trade deadline, then it's easy. You don't do anything. If they're miles behind everyone at the trade deadline, then it's easy. You trade everybody and you start over, even though the hope of starting over is to get 2 players to build around like Vlad and Bo, but I digress. You start over. The problem is, I don't think either of those situations are likely for this team. I think the likeliest scenario is that the Blue Jays are within 2.5 games of the last wildcard spot. Either way. Either they're 2.5 games up in there in that middle slot, or they're 2.5 games back and pushing for that last playoff spot. And then what do? Do you risk letting Vlad leave for nothing? Do you risk Bo leaving for nothing and push toward a playoff spot? At that point, I think you do, because if you trade him away, you're not getting that kind of ticket sales again for a long time. So I am just so stunned that it has been allowed to get to this point, that these guys have screwed up basically everything that they have touched with this roster, and that they are still allowed to have the decisions around it. So that's the story around baseball. So the Major League Baseball season is about to commence, and spring training is now underway, and so it is the start of our season previews. And I always like to take a look at where we are in Major League Baseball right now, looking at who are the best players in Major League Baseball. So let's start at the bottom and work our way up. Number 10, we are going to go with Zach Wheeler. I don't have many pitchers on this list. I still think Wheeler is legitimately one of the best arms in the game, and I think that he gives the Philadelphia Phillies just an absolute lockdown ace at the top of that rotation, and someone who you have a great amount of fear for when you are facing them in the postseason. Coming in at number 9, it is Ronald Acuna Jr. I still have to have him on this list. I know that we are now dealing with a second leg injury for him, and so who knows what he is going to be, but I still think when you look at how talented this kid can be, and the talent that we saw from him the last time he was out there on a field, I think you have to give him the benefit of the doubt that we're going to get something pretty special out of this kid. So I'd put him at number 9. At 8, it is Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Maybe a little bias on this one. I just think when you see the hit tool that he showed at the end of the 2024 season, it is power, it is average. He has a phenomenal eye at the plate and a very, very high baseball IQ, which again makes all of the frustration from Blue Jays fans around the lack of him signing with the team and the team's inability to build around him all the more prevalent when you include him on this list. But I feel like we are talking about one of the best players in Major League Baseball, and still just 25 years old. At 7, it's Adley Rutschman, playing catcher for the Baltimore Orioles. He has been everything that was advertised of him, that the kid can absolutely rake. He is a beast at the plate and a real difference maker out on the field for the Baltimore Orioles, and someone who is the face of this franchise and leading this group of really exciting young Orioles prospects into quite the era for Baltimore. Coming in at number 6, it is Bobby Witt Jr. Had a phenomenal season a year ago, and the only reason he's not higher is that he's only done it once. But still, an unbelievable talent, speed, hit, all of it. He is such an incredible ball player, and again, for a Kansas City Royals team that maybe overachieved a little bit last year, to have him be your kind of standard bearer there is a great place to start for the Royals. At 5, it's Garrett Cole. Obviously, his last outing didn't go phenomenally as everything melted down against the Dodgers in the World Series, but still a true ace at the top of the rotation for the New York Yankees, and someone who, again, you rely on when it comes to the postseason, and someone who just every 5th day you are getting a phenomenal performance from one of the best pitchers in the entire sport. At 4, it's Mookie Betts. I mean, the fact that he plays all over the field now is just such a testament to how good he is. Still, again, the hit, fantastic. The wheels, always excellent. Just a real threat anywhere he is out on the ball field, and just a delight to watch play the sport, really. And he would be the best player on most teams that he is on, and it is still just such a dangerous, dangerous weapon for the Los Angeles Dodgers. At 3, it is Juan Soto. Him maybe not being a defensive player all that much potentially could impact it, although, I mean, he's at 3. But you look at how good of a hitter he is, and, like, just an unbelievable eye, has power, has great contact, again, just every bit of the hit tool that he has, or every bit of the hit tool that you could have, he has it, and he has it at an elite level. At 2, it's Aaron Judge. Basically all of those same things, maybe not quite the eye that Juan Soto has. Defensively, he has been good in a couple of different spots. They trusted him in center field at times for the Yankees. I do think that is probably something that will come to a close at some point here. But the power is prodigious, and the one thing, and maybe the one that people would get frustrated by with this list, is that he has not done it in the postseason, and he has actually kind of done the opposite of it in the postseason. And that's, I mean, look, it's a couple of guys on here too. Vlad hasn't been blow away in the playoffs either, but I mean, the Judge coming off of the year he had a season ago, I don't know how you can put him anywhere but 2 on this list. And at number 1, it has to be Shohei Ohtani. He did things we had never seen before last year, and now he's going to pitch this year probably. So there is no dispute right now who the best player in all of Major League Baseball is. That there is absolutely no question. It has to be Shohei Ohtani at the top of this list. So here is your top 10. At 10, it is Zach Wheeler. 9, Ronald Acuna Jr. 8, Vlad Guerrero Jr. At 7, it is Adley Rutschman. At 6, Bobby Witt Jr. 5, Garrett Cole. 4, Mookie Betts. 3, Juan Soto. 2, Aaron Judge. And number 1 in all the land right now is Shohei Ohtani. We will continue with the baseball previews throughout the next basically month as we get ready for the start of the 2025 Major League Baseball season. The Los Angeles Dodgers won the World Series the last time we saw baseball that counted. But how? Let's take a look at how the Dodgers built their championship team. And I can already hear, like, as soon as you say, okay, how did the Dodgers build their championship team? There is going to be a segment of baseball fandom that says, oh, they just built or they bought a championship is what they did. Swig of water for the workman. And, I mean, yeah, there's that, like, I'm not going to, well, no, actually, the free agent acquisitions of Shohei Ohtani and Freddie Freeman actually weren't the biggest reason. I would love to come on and hot takery you guys like that. That ain't the case. We know, like, they acquired their 3 biggest stars. That's, yeah, we can talk about draft and develop until we're blue in the face. That ain't what happened here. These guys brought in some big names. Those big names played like big names and won a championship. I'm not going to say segment over because I still think there's a couple things that we can learn, but let's run through it. Let's start with the fielders, batters, if you will, shall we? Shohei Ohtani rather famously signed a contract with them for a whole lot of money. A lot of it he's getting later. He wasn't on a flight to Toronto, and he signed with the LA Dodgers, and again, it went very well. Mookie Betts was acquired along with David Price for Jeter Downs, Alex Verdugo, and Connor Wong, and so I just wanted to see, because this obviously feels like a one-sided trade. And so I want, okay, benefit of the doubt. Let's see what ended up coming of those guys. Well, Jeter Downs, I don't think is in baseball now, or at least not, Major League Baseball. Alex Verdugo, not with them anymore, but picked up 8.2 WAR along the way in his time with the Boston Red Sox. He got traded for a couple of guys who thus far have given Boston 1.2 WAR, and you have Connor Wong, who has presented them with 4 WAR so far. So overall, what is that? 8.2, 1.2, that's 9.4, and then another 4 is 13.4 WAR. All right, that's not a disaster. I mean, over 4 years, that's, 3-ish a year. So how much has Mookie Betts done, though? 27.4. So it's as one-sided as we remember it being. The Red Sox got human beings out of it, and some of them played baseball, and that's great for them. But this was one-sided ass-kicking of a trade in just remarkable fashion. And also, and this doesn't have to just be a complete rehashing of the Mookie Betts trade, but the astronomical amount of dumbassery to throw in David Price in there to clear him off of the books so that you get less of a return for Mookie Betts. Real dumb. Hate that you did that. Really hate that you did, especially because now you didn't. I mean, Trevor Story, that didn't really work out. So, hate that you didn't spend it in ways that were very effective. And now all this is going to bite me in the ass when, okay, signs over there next year. But still, Freddie Freeman, free agent signing, that one, it just kind of felt like he was locked on the Braves for forever coming off of a World Series. And then he wasn't. And he signs with the Dodgers and hits one of the most memorable home runs of the last 30 years en route to a World Series championship with that club. Teoscar Hernandez was also a free agent signing. After the Blue Jays traded him to the Mariners, Teoscar had a chance to go anywhere he wanted in free agency, and he picked correctly. Will Smith, first round pick, technically a compensatory pick, but he was drafted 32nd overall in 2016. The 2016 draft is real bad. I'm just going to let y'all know that one right now. 2016 was awful. 2 All-Stars have come out of that draft so far. Both of them were in the first round of that draft, sorry. Both of them were in the first, in the compensation part, and one of them was Will Smith. So the Dodgers, and this is a big part of a lot of why they are as good as they are. Because, and this is, the Blue Jays have proven this isn't 100% accurate. Anyone can just buy superstars. What these guys do, because we've seen that forever, right? Everyone has tried to go out and, okay, this is our big free agent. This is our big signing. This is our big this. This is our big that. Everyone does that. What these guys did behind them was so impressive with Will Smith finding that gem late in the first round. And we'll get to a couple of others, but that's how you win. That's how you become this model franchise. Yeah, they spend more than God on a lot of things, but they also develop in a very effective way. And I don't think they get nearly enough credit for that. Miguel Rojas was a shortstop. They acquired him from Miami for Jacob Amaya, who was then traded for a pitcher. Just a quick note, Amaya turns actually okay out of the park baseball in some of the not most recent forms of that game, but a couple down the line. So if you ever replaying that one, that's a name to watch. Max Muncy, free agent signing in 2017. And so you think, because Max Muncy has been very good for the Dodgers, like, oh yeah, there it is, another free agent. No, they signed him before he was arbitration eligible. They signed, he made, in his first year with the Dodgers, he made $485,000. So this wasn't a big ticket guy that they got. This was a dude just cast away. They picked him up and turned him into a borderline superstar for this ball club. Gavin Lux is one of the misses, they've now traded him. I believe Cincinnati is where he is at now. But he was a first round pick, 20th overall in 2016. And that one, it hasn't clicked in the way that I think a lot of people thought it would. He just hasn't really found that extra gear that people thought he might have. He's been fine, but just didn't hit in the way that a few other Dodgers have hit along the way. Kike Hernandez was acquired from Boston for Justin Happerson, minor league pitcher, and Nick Robertson, who was then traded for Tyler O'Neill. So Boston gets a little bit out of it. O'Neill didn't turn out to be amazing out there, but there was interest in him at the time anyway. And Kike turns into, again, one of the premier playoff performers and great personalities on that Los Angeles Dodgers team. You also have Andy Pages, the center fielder, signed in free agency in 2018. And last one here, Tommy Edman was acquired in a 3-team trade that also brought Michael Kopech over from the Chicago White Sox. Moving into the pitching staff, you have Jack Flaherty, who was acquired from Detroit at the deadline for a couple of players. You have Yoshinobu Yamamoto, rather famously, a free agent signing as well. Also didn't go to the Blue Jays. That was great. Walker Buehler was a first-round pick, 24th overall in 15. If injuries don't get in the way, that kid's an ace right now. And so, again, you draft an all-star catcher and an all-star starter in the back part of the first round. And I'm not saying like every year you go along and, oh yeah, no, there's a hit. Oh yeah, there's a hit. Oh yeah, there's a hit. But they get enough to supplement everything else that they are doing. And so, yeah, they're getting these big ticket whatevers, but they're also getting very valuable contributions from guys not making a whole lot of money and then building that up. And now Buehler is on his way out to Boston. Blake Trinan was a free agent signing in 2019. Ryan Brazier was a free agent signing in 2023. Michael Kopech acquired in that 3-team trade along with Tommy Edman. You have Brent Honeywell, who was a waiver claim. You have Anthony Banda, who was purchased from Cleveland. Evan Phillips was a waiver claim. You have Ben Kasparins, who was a 5th-round pick in 2021. Daniel Hudson was a free agent signing in 2021. Alex Vesia was acquired for Dylan Floro. Floro ends up getting traded for Jorge Lopez. So when you see that, the Dodgers, maybe we could have gotten a little bit more out of that than a relief pitcher here, but them's the breaks on that one. So kind of rushed through a whole lot of that. And again, the big thing to take from the Dodgers is that it's kind of dope to have money. That's like, I don't want to oversimplify things, and it's not just that they bought a championship, but they did buy a championship. And the way that they did that behind it, because the Yankees tried to, right? Like they got Aaron Judge there, who, you know, it's their own thing. They got Judge, and then, you know, they brought in Juan Soto and Garrett Cole and all those guys. So why did their buying a championship not work? It's because their Gleyber Torres ends up like being Will Smith, right? Like they're just, okay, well, let's see what this guy, it's Walker Buehler. The Yankees didn't have that. And so they had to try to go out and piece together a Anthony Rizzo and try to get the most out of him. And he ends up making a catastrophic error at the end of the World Series. And DJ LeMahieu, who just can't produce anymore in the way that they need him to. And then they have to go out and kind of overpay for Alex Verdugo and have that kind of just black hole in your lineup. The Dodgers don't have that. It's not that it's 1 through 9 all-star, but because of their draft and developing, they did such a great job of kind of backfilling in a lot of those spots. So yeah, you can go out and have a bunch of money tied up in a few guys when Max Muncy's making $500K over there. And now he has grown from there. But then, okay, well, that guy has grown. Well, we just purchased one of our high leverage relievers from Cleveland. We got another guy who pitched in 5 playoff games who was a waiver claim. Like it's the small moves that they make that take them from great to championship. And it is why when the Mets ownership change happened, that's why they were talking about we want to be the Dodgers of the East, because it is not just a team that spends a shitload of money, and they do, but they also draft, develop, and find a lot of gems out there in very effective ways. So obviously that is the big one, like late first round pick, with Will Smith, Walker Buehler, smaller free agent signings that hit. The other one this year that is different than what the team is going to be in 2025 is the pitching rotation really wasn't a strength. Like Glasnow was hurt. They signed Yamamoto, who was big, but aside from that, like Flaherty had an ERA of 7 in the playoffs, and like Buehler gets the final out in the World Series, but he was a little hit or miss. Like it was a very big concern going into the postseason what this rotation was going to be. Now they've supplemented that a little bit with Suzuki and Blake Snell this year, and Shohei coming back to pitch at some point probably, and Clayton Kershaw I imagine makes an appearance at some point this season. So again, they've done really well, and anything that may have been a perceived weakness, they can go out and get the best way possible to fix it, and that is because you're the Dodgers. You get to do those sorts of things. So could the Marlins pull off something like this? Probably not, but they could get a whole lot closer to it than I think that they give themselves credit for. They just don't want to spend in the way that they need to, whether it be on players or in player development. So a few messages to take away from how the LA Dodgers built their championship team. The Major League Baseball season is right around the corner, and everyone's going to do their power rankings and everything like that. One of the things I like to do is just look at every team. All right, who's got the most talent? And that doesn't always lead you to championships or anything like that, but it does tend to be a pretty good precursor for how things are going to go. So we're going to look at all of that today. Let's start with just kind of running through. Let's see who have the best lineups in baseball. Honorable mentions to the Rangers, Diamondbacks, Braves, and the Mets. And number 5 for my best lineup, I have Baltimore. Up and down the lineup, you have guys who you are at least concerned with. The pitching staff, I think, is a bit of a problem there, and that's going to ultimately keep them off of the best or most talented teams list. But I think that there are enough guys on this team that you really have to worry about as a pitcher that you still have to include this group as one of the best lineups in baseball. And there's some projection going on there, assuming a bit more development from Adley Rutschman, who made our best players list, and Gunnar Henderson. The San Diego Padres, still so much talent at the top of that lineup, with like guys like Tatis, like all of those guys have Machado. I know I said all that talented, 2 dudes, but they do really have quite a few players at the top of that lineup. Just those guys are the standouts. The back end of it does kind of fall off a little bit, but it is so very top heavy in a very, very good way. At 3, it is the New York Yankees. No, they don't have Juan Soto anymore, but you got a full year of Jazz Chisholm, Bellinger, and Goldschmidt. Should be a pretty good combination. And I think now a full season of Jason Dominguez is going to be very interesting for this team offensively as well. So it's a pretty good recovery from losing Juan Soto. At 2, it's the Philadelphia Phillies. A ton of pop and a ton of power, especially at the top of that lineup. But a lot of guys that can do a lot of damage there. And number 1, it's the LA Dodgers. They won a championship, and then they added to it with Conforto and with Kim to an already stacked lineup. Good grief. Looking at the best rotations now in baseball, honorable mention to the Royals, the Rangers, and the Blue Jays. At number 5, it is the Yankees. If they get the best out of everyone, then this is the best top 5 in the league, with Cole and Fried at the top. Some question marks there, specifically about Rodon, but I mean, now as your number 3, you're fine with that. At 4, it is the Phillies. When you can go with Wheeler and Nola, you're feeling very good about life. And then the 3 after that are pretty solid as well. At number 3, I have Arizona. I feel like people are kind of sleeping on this one a little bit with Corbin Burns, with Gallen, and with Kelly at the top. It's kind of insane. And if Rodriguez can get his footing back underneath him, then that is a dangerous 1 through 4 as a starting staff. Not quite as good as our number 2 team, the Seattle Mariners, who come in with Gilbert, Castillo, Kirby, and Miller. That is just a wild top 4. And the fact that they haven't been able to build around that more than they have is really frustrating, I would suggest, from a Mariner fan standpoint. And at number 1, it's the Dodgers. We talked about them in the how they were built earlier on. It's frustrating that, pitching is a bit of a weakness. Oh, okay, let's just go solve that with 2 of the best top 3, we'll say, pitching free agents on the market. Cool. Yamamoto, Snell, Sasaki, Glasnow, Gonsolin. That's their 5. I did not mention Shohei Ohtani yet, who should be able to pitch this year, and Clayton Kershaw. Ditto. Just absurd what they can do with that starting rotation. And so, Who are the most talented teams in Major League Baseball this year? My top 5. At 5, it is the Atlanta Braves. They did not show up in any of the most talented lists, but they're close enough in both. And I do think if Strider can get back to his form, and if Acuna can get back to his form, this is still an uber talented baseball team with a lot of very good players that you can get very excited about. So I still have to put them on this list. At 4, I have Arizona. I feel like people are sleeping on this team. That pitcher rotation is insane. And the top of the lineup, when you can roll with Carroll and Ketel Marte, adding Josh Naylor as a big power bat at the top of that lineup, and Lourdes Gurriel Jr. sticking around there, that is a very dangerous 1 through 4 at the top of that lineup, and then there's some decent depth there as well. So I think Arizona is one of the most talented teams in baseball right now. It's just they happen to be in a tough division. At 3, I have the Yankees. They made it onto both best lineup and best pitcher list, so I think you kind of have to. Same thing, Phillies at number 2. Like they have 2 of the best pitchers in baseball in their starting rotation, and they have several of the best hitters in baseball, certainly the best power hitters in baseball on their team. And if any major world event happens, Nick Castellanos is going to have an amazing day. And at number 1, they were 1 in the starters, they were 1 in the lineup. It's the Dodgers. They're an absurdly talented baseball team, and anytime they lose, it should be treated as a gift from the baseball gods. So those are the most talented teams in Major League Baseball going into the 2025 season. The Major League Baseball season is rapidly approaching, and for some teams, that means that the time where they're going to very much disappoint a lot of people is rapidly approaching. And so today, we are looking at the 5 most overvalued teams in Major League Baseball going into this year. Let's begin with the Cleveland Guardians. Their win total from Vegas is at 83.5. And so I think that this is a team that is quite a bit overrated or overvalued right now. They have an elite level bullpen and a couple of good starters, but I don't think that is enough this year to get them through. You have Jose Ramirez, who's excellent offensively. They freed up a little bit of money with a couple of moves that they made with the Blue Jays, but I still don't see this as a team that can repeat what they did a season ago. And maybe there is just a little bit of remembering what happened in the playoffs and stuff like that. But I just, the bullpen is awesome. And so they are going to win quite a few 2-1 games. But aside from Ramirez, I don't see this team hitting enough to be able to make any kind of noise. And now, one thing I will say, like I have 2 teams from the AL Central and 2 teams from the NL Central. So, the coastal elite, as I sit here in landlocked Calgary, Alberta, Canada. But, the one thing that gives me a bit of a pause with some of these things is, someone's going to have to win these games in these divisions. And that's what happened last year in the Central, is that everyone just got to kick the tar out of Chicago, and they were able to get a few playoff teams in there. And so there is that risk that you just get too beat up on what is, from the start of the season, a worse Chicago team, and you're going to be able to get quite a few wins that way, but I just don't know how much was repeatable from Cleveland a season ago. Up next, I have St. Louis. Their win total is at 76.5, and so I just think like Goldschmidt's gone. Arenado is as good as gone, and honestly, by the time you're watching this, he might be gone. I think they're going to have to take a step back, and I think they still have a few like big league ready pieces, no doubt, but I do think that there is a very high probability that as this thing goes sideways, they can be a team that really can load up at the trade deadline and get a few good pieces back, but probably fall off as the season goes along. I told you we're going to be sticking central for most of these today. It is the Kansas City Royals. I have them right now, 82.5 is the total. Look, I like Witt a lot, and they made some really smart moves last offseason that put them in a position where they could just be a good baseball team and just get in. But I don't know if they built around it enough going into this year. And so I think they are a team that is almost there offensively and almost there with the pitching staff and almost there with the bullpen and just needed to bolster things a little bit more if they were going to really take advantage of the momentum they had coming off of last season. Speaking of which, the Baltimore Orioles at 88.5. I love so many pieces on this team. They have, look, I'm not breaking news to you. They have an amazing core that they should be building around. all they did this offseason was lose, basically. Like Santander, not amazing, but that's a loss. Corbin Burns, leaving, I think, really hurts an average pitching staff. And so that's what they stay. It's an average pitching staff. And so not doing anything this offseason, maybe this is part of it, is that I'm a little pissed they didn't do anything, because it feels like you're wasting some very good years with this ball club. And so I just feel like it is a team that is in a bit of a difficult spot. And this is not how you win in the American League East. As a lifelong Blue Jays fan, trust me, this is not how you win in American League East. But you look at the East right now, like the Yankees, they take a bit of a step back, but only a minor one. And like we can get into the Yankees thing, but obviously the pieces that they added do not equal Juan Soto. Like that hurts a little bit, but the bullpen's better and all that. I don't want to legislate if the Yankees are actually that good or not, but I think conservatively, let's say the Yankees take a minor step back. Well, the Red Sox, I think, take a big step forward. And the Blue Jays, while swinging and missing a lot in free agency, they still got better with the aforementioned Santander and Scherzer, and adding quite a few pieces to the back end of that bullpen. They are not a fantastic team, but they are certainly a better baseball team than the one that finished the season a year ago. And so there is, I think, a bit of a concern that Baltimore might take half a step back this season. Still be competitive, might even still be a playoff team. And honestly, they will, I think, going away, have the best record of all 5 teams that is mentioned in this segment. But in terms of getting them to 90 wins again, I just don't think they have the pitching for that right now. The last one, the Milwaukee Brewers. They're at 81.5. And I look at this team and I don't really see a 500 ball club here. They have just consistently lost a piece. And now that they're starting to get some pieces back for them, but even those are a little underwhelming. Like Nestor Cortez for Devin Williams, that's just not going to, it's going to move the needle, but in a wrong way. And they lose Willy Adames. There's just not a whole lot going on now with Milwaukee. And so I just don't see how they get a whole lot done and again, the Central Division, a little bit weaker this year, but I still think that, I think Cincinnati got better. I think the Cubs, I know the Cubs got better with the acquisition of Tucker. And yeah, they lose Bellinger, but I think the Cubs are going to be quite a bit better. And so I think that Milwaukee takes a step back here just by being a bit of a mid team right now. It is just about time for the start of the Major League Baseball season, and it is an important one for the Toronto Blue Jays and for a number of players on the Toronto Blue Jays. So today, we are going to be looking at players who could bounce back for the Blue Jays, who I think will bounce back for the Blue Jays in the 2025 season. We begin with the obvious, and it is Bo Bichette. This one, again, it's obvious. There is no way that he hits 225 in a contract year for the Blue Jays. There is literally no way that is happening. His career BABIP, batting average on balls in play, is 338. Last year, it was 265. The hard hit rate was down a touch, but not enough to validate that level of an issue. Normally, batting average on balls in play, it's the whole, oh, that one is going to look like a screamer in the whatever, but you got to hit them where they ain't and all those things. This kind of normalizes that a little bit. And so when you have a dramatic drop in your BABIP, generally that means a touch of unluckiness. And now there is some things where Bo was not as unlucky on, right? Like he didn't hit the ball as hard. His chase rate was the same, but his contact rate on pitches outside of the zone was the lowest of his career. And so I do think that there is a little bit of that going on, that teams are kind of expanding the zone a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more on him. And as he was becoming a little bit desperate and a little bit more frustrated as the season went on, he got a little bit more chase happy and was missing on some of those. So if there is a little bit more discipline there, I think he's going to be okay. I think that there is a real all-star potential in Bo Bichette for this season and for seasons beyond. I think that this is genuinely a guy who could be one of the better players in baseball. I don't think he's going to crack our top 10 list or anything like that, but I do think that there is a very, very, very good player in there. And I would be surprised if you don't see him come out at some point here this season for the Toronto Blue Jays. Also, primed, I think, for a breakout is Alejandro Kirk. He is someone who, any time you watch any broadcast that he is on, everyone is talking about how just he is absolute aces when it comes to being a hitter. And he's just such a professional hitter is something that you hear around him. And so I would be surprised if there was a fall off for him and not just a real breakout. He hit 269 in the second half last year, including 321 in July and 297 in September and a little bit into October there. Only 5 home runs too. I think he is a much better power hitter than that. And so I think as he gets accustomed to playing catcher every day a little bit more often, I think that you'll get back to seeing the offensive player that the Blue Jays quite frankly desperately need him to be. So I think that there is a real bounce back potential in Alejandro Kirk here for the upcoming season. I think that would be such a huge boost to this offense. Another one that doesn't seem to be talked about a whole lot. Davis Schneider finished with an average under 200 last season. And look, I don't know if he's going to be a guy who is hovering around the Mendoza line a lot. And even when we're looking at a potential bounce back, I don't think that is him this year either. But I do think it's the power that should still be a factor for him. And honestly, like it's strange, but I do think that less playing time for him is actually going to help him down the stretch of the season here. Or not down the stretch of this, well, down the stretch of the season, but overall, like they started out with him and he was on fire, but he was only playing every couple of days. And then the offense was dreadful. So he had to play every day. And you could see as those times were extending, he was kind of getting worse and worse. And so I think with better organizational depth and him kind of coming in a little bit more spot duty is really actually going to help him stay fresh and stay on top of what teams are trying to do to him in that batter's box. And so I really do think that this is a guy who has bounce back potential. And if he can get to those power numbers that he had even just a couple of seasons ago, that is, we've talked about it, such a boost for this Blue Jays team. Because as we've talked about, like the top of the lineup is good with Bichette, and there's been some talk about him leading off. Bichette, Springer, Vladdy, Santander. That is a good 1 through 4, however you want to organize them. That's a good 1 through 4. If you can get Kirk to be a bounce back guy and have that power as your number 5. If you can have a Davis Schneider a couple of times a week, be a bounce back guy and be someone who can hit 20 home runs from the bottom third of your order. Now all of a sudden we got 6 that you're feeling a little bit more comfortable with. I would imagine that part of that is a bit of a with Schneider would be a switching on and off with a Will Wagner who was unbelievable a season ago. And so you have to think there's a bit of a coming down there. But if those two can kind of balance each other off, then again, you're starting to see where there could be some improvement for this Blue Jays team. I think there's going to be a lot of improvement. Like you want to talk about Blue Jays bounce back candidates, just the Blue Jays in general, I think will be a bounce back candidate this season. And I don't think it's going to be as bad as last year was. And I do think that with the opportunity that some of these kids are going to get and the potential for them to really kind of break out, that is going to be, I think, very important for the Toronto Blue Jays. So every year we think we have it down. Every year we know who's going to win how many games. But evidently, we're always off on a few. And Vegas sometimes underrates a few teams. Today we're going to look at the teams that have been underrated by Las Vegas, looking at the most undervalued teams in Major League Baseball. Let's start with a couple of teams who we broke down on the National League preview yesterday. Let's look at the Arizona Diamondbacks. Their win total is set at 86.5. And I think when you have those top 3 at the top of your rotation, and then you have Rodriguez or Montgomery who could have a breakout, then you're going to be really competitive. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think this offense is underrated. With Carroll at the top, Marte, they go out and acquire Naylor who can just mash, and Lourdes Gurriel Jr., who can go on some real runs with the bat, and then some secondary pieces with Moreno and some other guys there as well. I just think that this is a bit more of a complete team than people are giving them credit for, and I think that we watched them go to the World Series and watched them falter in the World Series, and then when they don't bounce back the next year, it's like, okay, well, they're done and out of the conversation, because you have a lot of bright, shiny toys, with the Giants getting Adames, with the Padres always getting someone, and the Dodgers being the Dodgers. These guys kind of get forgotten about in the National League West, but I really do think there's a very good baseball team in there, and one that is going to give teams a lot of problems. And I think we're going to look at the standings at some point. It's like, okay, well, Yes, the Diamondbacks are just awesome again. That's where I am with them. The Cubs, 85.5 wins. I think they're undervalued at that as well. I think they have a very easy division to maneuver, and going out and acquiring Tucker as the centerpiece, you would have loved to have paired that with Bellinger instead of losing him for basically nothing, but you still have one of the premier players in baseball on your team, or a guy who potentially could be that anyway for at least a season. Like a little bit more around him throughout the diamond, but I still think that they are so easily the best team in that central division that there is going to be, with a good manager, that there's going to be some opportunities to get some easy wins for the Cubs coming up this season and really kind of bump up that win total. Let's move to the American League now. The Detroit Tigers, I think, are undervalued. Somewhat similar to the Cubs here. It's an easy division, and I think they have the most complete team in it right now. I think that there is obviously an ace at the top of that rotation. I think that some of the bats probably start to develop a little bit more this season, and I don't think after how last season went that if they're close to it around the deadline that they're going to be sellers once again. I think that this is a team that is ready to not break out in a big time way, like whoever they play in the first round of the playoffs, I think beats them probably. But I do think that this is the best team in that division right now. Moving out to the National League West, I think the Rangers are undervalued a little bit at 85.5 wins. They are healthier than they were last year, and now I think they have a chance with the Astros being a little bit down as well. I think there's an opportunity for the Rangers to kind of bounce back after not a phenomenal defense of their World Series. Well, we know that there is a lot of talent on this team, and just a lot of them kind of hit a wall last year. But I think with DeGrom, whatever you get from him, with DeGrom as the centerpiece of that rotation, and still with Seager and Semien at the top of that lineup, a whole lot is possible with this team. Gonna stay in that division, though, and go with the Mariners. I think they have the best rotation in baseball. The division feels wide open, and I just can't believe that Julio Rodriguez is going to get off to the slow start that he had a season ago. I think there is an absolute superstar in that kid. And so I think that given now some injury issues in the pitcher rotation, but given what they have in that rotation, and given some of the guys who I think can still hit enough, I think that there is, again, a playoff team in Seattle. And I think that they have been aggressive around trade deadlines before, and I think that they will be again, kind of understanding that it's been too often close but no cigar, with Houston maybe being a little bit more vulnerable with no Bregman, with no Tucker. I think that Seattle has a chance to really take a shot here. So I think we've talked about two very interesting teams in the American League West here today. Let's now go to the Toronto Blue Jays. They are the team that I focus on out here the most, and so do a little bit extra in the season previews with them as the season goes on. For more Blue Jays stuff, there's a playlist created on YouTube called the Catlin Autocast. It's Blue Jays podcast I started for a little bit, but have now just basically transitioned into where I put all the Blue Jays content on YouTube. If you're listening in podcast, Blue Jays Breakdown was last week looking at guys who could bounce back. So today, it's going to be a little bit more negative as we look at players who could fall off for the Toronto Blue Jays in the 2025 season. The Toronto Blue Jays have a ton of pressure and a ton of expectations, and last year did not live up to any of those. But there are still a couple of guys who might fall off a little bit more from a season ago. Who are the fall-off candidates for the Toronto Blue Jays in the 2025 season? Well, as mentioned before, it was not a banner year for the Toronto Blue Jays last year. And so the good news is, it's tough to pick a fall-off candidate when everybody fell off a season ago. But I still looked at a couple of guys on here. There's someone at 960 is going to be a little upset with me when I pick this one. But I think Ernie Clement is a fall-off candidate. He had 263 last year with 12 home runs. I think both of those could be all like career Blue Jay highs when all is said and done for him. And I get like his batting average a couple of seasons ago was actually higher, but it was in 24 games. So when looking at like qualifying seasons, I think these could be career highs for him. He is a phenomenal defensive player, but I do think that as baseball kind of figures him out, that there's going to be maybe a few more lows for him. And one of the talk a lot was that he's just gearing up for a fastball, so just don't throw him a fastball. He kind of figured it out. To his credit, he figured that out, and he hit quite well against sliders and splitters this year, but he hit almost unsustainably well against those. And so even if there is a bit of a normalization and a bit of a bounce back against fastballs this year for him, I can't see him hitting that well against splitters and against sliders specifically. And so I do think there's going to be a bit of a drop off for him. Again, he's going to be a useful player for the Toronto Blue Jays as a glove, but I think from a hitting standpoint, to just pencil him in 13 points ahead of the Mendoza line and with 12 home runs, I think would be being remarkably optimistic around a guy who I just don't see consistently being around those levels. And the other one in the pitching rotation is Bowden Francis. 3.03 ERA last year, really solid. And I think he's a really good pitcher. But I do think now there could be a bit of a touch of a step back with the rest of baseball, kind of figuring out where he is and figuring out who he is and getting a bit of an understanding on that. And so I think like the win totals could go up because the team's going to be better. I think that he is going to have a few easier pitching matchups because he's probably penciled in as like a 4-5 guy right now, and there were times he was the 3 with the Blue Jays a season ago. But I do think that ERA kind of goes up a little bit more as people get a little bit more familiar with his tendencies and start to figure him out a little bit more as well. So I think that there could be a bit of a drop-off for a Bowden Francis this year, but I think the Blue Jays have done a good job of kind of solidifying both of these, actually, with some of the additions. Like in the pitching rotation, it is the acquisition of Max Scherzer that just gives you a little bit of breathing room, and one that I think it's why I was saying it was so important, because now instead of hoping that Francis can maybe even be a 3 if Bassett doesn't bounce back in the way that you want, now you can kind of comfortably throw him in as a 5 and just whatever you get is whatever you get. And if he doesn't fall off, if he is just a right around 3 ERA guy, then that is a phenomenal thing to have as a number 5 in your rotation. And so that's why I think there was a little bit of a cushion built in there by acquiring a Max Scherzer. And the same thing with Ernie Clement. If there is a touch of a fall off, I think going out and getting the power of Anthony Santander, and then hoping for, as we talked about, bounce backs from Bo Bichette and Alejandro Kirk, and maybe a continuation of what we saw from a Will Wagner, will just kind of offset a little bit of what not even just offset, but really mask a little bit of the drop that you may have from an Ernie Clement. So I do think the Blue Jays kind of set themselves up in a pretty good way around that. Let's get back to the rest of the Major League Baseball preview now, as we look at players on the hot seat. A little bit later on, we'll look at coaches who are on the hot seat, and that's a bit more of a traditional whatever. That one's easy. It's which managers are under the most pressure. But these are players on teams that fancy themselves at least around contention, that are making some pretty good money, in a couple of cases, really good money, that really need to have bounce back years. And if they don't, there could be some kind of a move that is made. So these are the players on the hot seat going into the 2025 Major League Baseball season. So, Major League Baseball's season, again, right around the corner, and that means it's time for the seats to heat up a little bit. Later on in the MLB previews, we'll be looking at the coaches on the hot seat, but today we're going to look at the players who are facing some job potential issues if some not great play continues. Players on the hot seat for the 2025 season. We begin with George Springer. It was a down year for George Springer out in Toronto. And if there is another one, which a lot of people are anticipating, I think the Blue Jays, if it's a down season for Springer, there could be a real concern that it's kind of a down year for the Blue Jays. And I'm not saying as he goes, they go, because there's a lot of talented players on this team still. But I do think that if this is a fall off year again for Toronto and Springer is still just kind of muddling around, the Blue Jays, they've brought in some younger players, like a Loperfido, even like a Straw and those guys. Like they've brought in some young kids who they might want to take a look in one of those corner outfield spots. And so honestly, the Blue Jays, like, they have the financial ability to kind of just cut bait if they have to. And they've talked about kind of flexing those financial muscles. If they have to do that in a rebuilding sense, I could see them just like, yeah, Springer out of here, or just retain whatever, like sending cash however much you need, and just kind of bailing on this one. So I think George Springer, in terms of like keeping a job with the Blue Jays, and I don't want to say, like, I don't think he's playing in Japan next year, but I do think in terms of like his reputation and having a starting spot in Major League Baseball, this is a very, very big season for him. Dansby Swanson is another one for me. A bit of a disappointing last couple of seasons. And now there's expectations out in Chicago. And now there's pressure out in Chicago a little bit. And so I just feel like there is a pressure on him to step up and a pressure on him to be a secondary piece around a Kyle Tucker and really help round out this offense a little bit. And with that move for Tucker and a couple of moves the Cubs have made in the last couple of off seasons, this is a win now baseball team. And if Dansby Swanson ends up not now being a win now player, I think that they could look to upgrade that position around trade deadline time and try to move on from him. Again, it's a big contract, but they're the Cubs. They have money to deal with big contracts. And the last one, this one, it feels a little bit unfair, but it's Rhys Hoskins. Coming off of injury problems, he had a prove-it year last year. He did not prove it. Now it's desperation time. The Brewers desperately need any kind of bat at all to do anything in this organization. And if he is not going to be that guy, then odds are this is going to be a rebuilding year in Milwaukee anyway, and the start of a rebuilding time in Milwaukee. And so they'll probably try to find some kid somewhere who can play either DH or a corner infield spot or wherever you would want to put Hoskins. I think that if this is not the bounce back year that he needs, and a lot of people want to see from him, right? Like, he was a promising player, injuries get in the way, great team success without him. All of that just has to be really tough to deal with. And so you want for the player for this to be a bounce back year, and Milwaukee kind of needs it for the player to have a bounce back year. So those are the three players that I think are on the hot seat in Major League Baseball, at least to start the 2025 campaign. The Major League Baseball season is rapidly approaching. It started for a couple of teams, but for the Toronto Blue Jays, it is a very important one. And there's a lot of pressure on a lot of players on this team. We know that guys at the top, Vladdy, probably going to be pretty good. Gosman, probably going to be pretty good. Barrios, hoping he's going to be good. You have some hopes that there could be some bounce backs from guys like Springer, Bo Bichette, and a real boost from a new addition like Anthony Santander. But this Blue Jays team, the 2025 Blue Jays, if they're going to do anything, they are going to need some breakout performances this year. And there is so much pressure on this group in 2025. So right now, let's look at who could break out for the Blue Jays in that way this season. Let's begin with Aurelvis Martinez. I think he has been forgotten about. He has a great spring last year, earns his way to the big club, and then, because everything went wrong for the Blue Jays a season ago, he goes out and gets suspended for 80 games for PED use. Now, looking at him this year, he hasn't exactly deflated, and there is still all of those traits there. And I think there's going to be a real mentality to prove everyone wrong after a PED suspension. And so I think that there is still a very talented player in that ball player. And I think that when you look at what he can bring to this lineup, if you have him, like if he can be a consistent everyday number 5 hitter for this team, and wherever you're going to put him, maybe a third base, maybe he's a DH, like who knows where you put him, but I feel like he has been forgotten about, and I think that he has a chance to really break out in a very substantial way for the Toronto Blue Jays for the upcoming season. So I think that he is the one that has the most kind of variance. Like, he could be a guy that ends up in AA by the time this season is done, or like DFA'd or something like that, or there's a chance he's playing in the All-Star game. Like, I think that he has that much of a range of outcomes this season. The other one for me, another guy who's kind of been forgotten about a little bit, and that's Yariel Rodriguez. He came out as a swing guy last year. I think there's some good stuff there, and I think that he is going to have a bit of a turnaround. And I think, honestly, I think there's going to be a bit of an undeniability to him this year. I think it's going to be a little bit like a Bowden Francis last year, where you just, like, he kept performing, and he kept performing, and he kept performing. At some point, it's like, okay, yeah, he's that guy, I guess. And so I think that with him this year, a full year kind of being stretched out a little bit more, and a full year of a bit more of a defined role for him could really be beneficial for Rodriguez to get, I think, the most out of some pretty good stuff. I don't think he's going to be the ace for this team. I don't think he's going to be starting any playoff games for this team this year, but I do think that there is a good pitcher in there. And so I do think there's going to be a bit of a breakout, and I think that it could put some pressure to push either a Francis or a Scherzer into a bullpen role. And the last one is Will Wagner. Comes to the team at the blue line, comes to the team at the deadline and really showed up. And so I think that is a really big momentum builder going into this year now. A bit of a proof of concept. Like, this is what you can do now at the major league level. We now know a couple things maybe we need to work on, but this is another guy who I think has the potential, can play some third base, can be a DH, another guy who has the potential, I think, to break out for the Blue Jays and kind of extend what we saw at the end of last year into this year. I'm not expecting, I think he hit like 307 or 317 in the final month or so of the season. That's probably not going to be consistent, but if he can be around like a 265 guy flirting with 20 home runs, that's going to be a very valuable piece of this Blue Jays team this season. And I think that would qualify as a breakout to help the Blue Jays in the upcoming year. So those are three players that I think could break out for the Blue Jays. An honorable mention as well to Barger, who just has a absolutely F the world swing. And I think last year might have been a little bit too early for him, but now he understands major league pitching and understands what they're going to try to do to him and can kind of attack things based off of that information. So he is another one that just an honorable mention to him on that one. More Blue Jays talk as the season kind of comes closer and closer. Let's now dive back into the Major League Baseball preview portion of all of this. As earlier in the offseason, we went through the best players in Major League Baseball. Today, we're going to look at the players who will decide the season. They're not the best in Major League Baseball, but how they go could really shift the power dynamic across the league this year. So let's look at 5 guys who have a chance to really decide how this baseball season is going to go in 2025. So, the Major League Baseball season, just about here. Oftentimes we look at, okay, who are the best players and all of that. And we've done that. Check it out, YouTube playlist and all of that. Today, we're going to look at who could decide this baseball season. Who, if they go this way, so much changes. And if they go this way, changes on the other side. Who are 5 players that could really shift how this baseball season goes? Number 1, with the amazing Mets, it is Pete Alonso. You know Soto is going to be awesome. That's just, unless he gets hurt, you know Soto is going to be fantastic. You are assuming that Lindor is going to have a pretty good stretch or two. If Alonso is a beast, then this team is very dangerous. Like, if they just have a 1, 2, 3 of, like, Lindor, speed, bit of power, like all-around guy, Soto, best hitter in baseball, and if Alonso is just a tank-hitting machine behind those guys, then this is an almost unstoppable top of the lineup. And that's basically how the Yankees went to the World Series, was with Soto and Judge just crushing teams on a nightly basis and then getting enough pitching and enough from everybody else. The Mets could basically just do that. But if Alonso has a bit of a down year, like if the average is going to stay really low and the power maybe takes a touch of a step back or whatever, then it's going to be tough for the Mets to compete with a talented, well-rounded Braves team and a top-heavy but very good Philadelphia Phillies team in a growingly competitive National League. So how Alonso goes, I think, is how the Mets go, and that really does influence a lot of how the National League goes. In the American League, Garrett Crochet, I think I said 5 before, it's 4 that we're looking at today. Garrett Crochet, if he is just a number 1, if he kind of reaches the potential that a lot of people think he has, then this brings us basically back a couple of decades where it's the Red Sox and the Yankees at the top of this division. It puts the Orioles in a really tough spot because they don't have the pitching to match that, and I think it puts the Blue Jays in a very tough spot as well. This lineup's going to be good with Devers and with Bregman at the top of it. And I think there's a couple other guys who are going to be able to really produce for the Red Sox. And like they also acquire Walker Buehler, who could very easily be on this list. But if Garrett Crochet is just an ace, and if he can reach the potential that a lot of people see in him, then this all of a sudden becomes one of the better pitching staffs in baseball, and all of a sudden it becomes one of the best teams in baseball, and they make a real push at the Yankees in that spot. And I think that sets the Orioles back a ways, and I think it sends the Blue Jays in a tailspin that just decides basically the rest of the season based off of trades and things like that. So I think that it has a real lasting effect in what is generally a glamour division in Major League Baseball. Luis Robert is another one here. Not for the White Sox. at all. But if someone pulls off the trade to finally get this guy out of Chicago and brings him in, I think it could be a very big power dynamic shift in MLB. Don't look at any of his numbers in Chicago. This is a all-star caliber, extremely talented ball player. He is just in a piss-poor situation. If you can get that guy into a winning environment, this is going to be a dude who threatens for a spot next year in the top 10 in the best players in baseball. I genuinely believe that. I think there is all of that in there. It's just been surrounded by crap for so long. And so it's a move that I've wanted the Blue Jays to make for 2 off seasons now. Go get that guy. They've been looking for a center fielder maybe type with Varsho kind of being the center fielder by default. Blue Jays go out and get that dude to add to the top of their lineup. Varsho and left, Springer and right, let's say. Then you have a top of your order of Robert, Bichette, Vladdy, Santander, Springer batting 5, Kirk at 6, Varsho at 7, Wagner at 8 all of a sudden. Like, all of a sudden, it sets that up as one of the better lineups in baseball. The Yankees, if Dominguez just can't do it out in left field, and they just want to go out and just make an effort splash, add to that guy, all of a sudden the Yankees have easily one of the best lineups in baseball. And so, like, he is going to be a guy that if someone can just go out and get that dude, then you, I think, really can shift the power in your way in Major League Baseball. And the last one is Julio Rodriguez. If he's a star that a lot of people think he can be, and a star that he has been before, they have the pitching staff that they could be a very dangerous team, and they could, like, borderline run away with the West if he is just back to all-star level, given the talent they have in that rotation and a little bit of the pop that they have behind him. But if he is just a difference maker, and again, if he is a guy who is challenging for a top 10 spot in our best players of the year, or best players in Major League Baseball rankings by the time next season rolls around, then it probably means the Mariners have had a very good season, and he is absolutely capable of doing something like that. So he is someone who, look, if he doesn't, then the Mariners just don't hit enough to be able to compete with the Rangers and what's left of the Astros out there. So I think he is a player that can really decide how the how the American League West goes in 2025. So those are players who can really decide some things. Couple coaches who need things to go their way in a very bad way. Let's look at 3 coaches who are on the hot seat going into the 2025 baseball season. A coach's life is never easy, but now that we come into this season, there are a few who are really feeling the heat. Let's look at 3 coaches who are on the hot seat entering the 2025 Major League Baseball season. We start with, I think, the most obvious one. It's John Schneider with the Toronto Blue Jays. There is a ton of pressure in Toronto with Vlad and Bo, both as free agents. And given how this thing has been just a complete disaster the last couple of seasons in Toronto, they have done the fire the manager thing before a couple of times. If this does not get off to a good start in Toronto, I think that is a lever that they pull really quickly. When you have a GM and honestly probably a president whose jobs are on the line, I think John Schneider needs this to be the Blue Jays are 12-5 to start the season. They need that. If the Jays are, 7-10 as we get into the last week of April, then we're probably talking about a managerial change. Like, I think one bad month and John Schneider is looking for other work and the Blue Jays are looking for a new manager. So that is the amount of pressure that this guy is under. And it just so happens to be in what appears to, again, be one of the most competitive divisions in all of baseball. So best of luck to you. The next one is Rocco Baldelli. I don't think what's happened in Minnesota last year is his fault necessarily, but I do think that there is pressure on him to not have a couple of bad years in a row with this particular team. And so I could see that one being it, because they don't really have the bullets in the chamber to make a couple big moves. And so that could be kind of the spark that maybe they look for. He's been around for a while. The playoff success hasn't been there. Now the regular season success last year wasn't there. If that's something that if all of a sudden they're behind Detroit and Cleveland and Kansas City again, I could see that being a bit of a tough one for Rocco Baldelli to make it through. Again, I don't think it's his fault what happened in Minnesota last year and into this year, but I do think that he could end up being the fall guy. And the last one is Derek Shelton out in Pittsburgh. With Skeens now and the pitching staff that they are now looking to improve. And because of that, there are actual expectations out in Pittsburgh. And so because of that, Derek Shelton, I think, is one who, it's not the John Schneider. Like if they go 7-12 to start the year, he's not getting fired. But if this season doesn't really show a whole lot of progression, specifically for Skeens, and if they don't seem like they're being more competitive in a division that it should be easy to be competitive in, then I could see Derek Shelton maybe getting, out of there, because it's one thing when you're losing a bunch of games and no one really cares, but now you're looking to build up a little bit more. You would like to see more done in the offseason, but I still think there's pressure on Derek Shelton to get that job done this season. The Major League Baseball season is right around the corner. It's begun for a couple of teams, and that means a lot of pressure. The fun in the sun in the spring is one thing, but once the lights are on bright, who has all the pressure on them this season? Let's talk about it. And we begin with the New York Yankees. There is always pressure on the New York Yankees. They are perpetually in this list, but specifically this year, this is their window. They extended Aaron Boone. They got outbid for the biggest free agent in the sport in Soto. The Yankees don't get outbid for free agents of their own that they want. Now, they bounced back in a good way, which means anything less than a World Series is a loss for the New York Yankees. And it does kind of feel like, we've talked about a little bit in these previews, how the Red Sox have gotten a little bit better, how the Mariners could be a bit of a threat. But this should be at least an American League championship for the Yankees this year. But it really, the pressure is on to fly banner number 28 for this team. They are always under that pressure, but it does kind of feel like with Judge, as that contract starts to age a little bit, and like how many great playoff performances from Stanton are you going to have? Garrett Cole, already some injury problems in spring training at the time of this recording. Max Fried has not exactly been the picture of health. That there is going to be a bit of a reckoning, I guess, for this Yankee team at some point. And so the window is now for this team. And for a lot of teams, not winning a championship in 15, 16 years, that's life. I'm going on a lifetime with the Toronto Blue Jays. But for the Yankees, that type of a run is unacceptable and unheard of. They're even allowing guys to have beards. That's the pressure they're feeling this year. So the Yankees, they are always in that window. Speaking of my favorite team, and maybe there is a bit of bias here, but the Toronto Blue Jays, I think, are one of the teams that need it the most. And honestly, probably more than the Yankees this season. This was supposed to be a golden period for Toronto when everything was starting and you were going through like 15 and 16 with Bautista and Donaldson and Encarnacion and all of those guys, David Price for a minute. You knew that at some point it was going to, again, that bill was going to come due. But they recovered in a way where you were really excited about Bo and Vladdy. And then at the time, it's Cavan Biggio, it's Lourdes Gurriel Jr. They make a great trade for Francisco Liriano, where they bring in a kid named Teoscar Hernandez. This was going to be a golden period for the Toronto Blue Jays. And instead, there is 1 year left on Bo and Vladdy's contracts. Cavan can't get a job in Major League Baseball. Lourdes was traded away, and Teoscar Hernandez was dealt away as well. So the last two pieces of what was supposed to be a golden period for the Blue Jays could potentially leave with the same amount of playoff wins as I have. That is unacceptable for this Blue Jays team. And who knows what happens next offseason, but it's not like there's a lot of promising pieces coming down the pipeline. This is a win now season if you have ever seen one for the Toronto Blue Jays. And so they are under so much pressure. If this year doesn't go well, at the deadline, they completely blow it up and they start it over. But then the manager is fired, the GM's fired, and most people would be calling for the president to get canned as well. And then anyone who is of any value on this team gets traded. And it is a complete start over in a division that's really, really tough to start over in. So no pressure, but all the pressure on the Blue Jays. We're staying in the East, but with a bit more of a national flavor for the next one, as the Philadelphia Phillies. They have so much talent, and they've had a trip to the World Series before, and that's so much fun for them. But you know that the Braves aren't going to be down for long with the GM that they have. You know that the Mets every year are just only going to get better as the seasons go along with the money that they have and the resources that they're putting into everything, not just free agents, but the drafting, developing, scouting, all of those things. This is a time where the Mets are still kind of figuring their stuff out, and where it feels like the Braves have kind of taken a step back. There's a lot of pressure on the Phillies to have a real breakout year as Harper is maybe winding down, as you don't know how many great years you have left with Wheeler and Nola. So I think there's a lot of pressure on the Phillies to kind of break through. Baltimore is up next, so 3 teams in the American League East. They have a very bright future and a lot of talent, but there's going to be some frustration if they don't take a step forward this year, and they did not have a good offseason. The pitching staff only got worse. It did not get better at all. So there is quite a bit of pressure and quite a bit of frustration around this Orioles team, and if you are going to, we just talked about it with Toronto, you don't want to waste these prime rookie contract years of Rushman and Holiday and Gunnar Henderson and those types of guys. So they did not get better this offseason. They are banking on a lot of internal growth from some of their young pieces to get better and to kind of meet the expectations that you would assume they have for a team that has the young talent that they have. And now the last one, the San Diego Padres. They have been big spenders for a really long time. And basically all they have to show for it is a fantastic playoff series a year ago with the Los Angeles Dodgers. But now I think you need to have some real wins to validate the constant aggressive approach that this front office has had. And I don't think if they don't win this year, they're going to blow everything up or anything like that. Like they have talented young pieces, but it is, I think, time to see this team take a real and meaningful progressive step toward a championship and at least be a real threat to be a championship this season with some of the exciting young talent that you have been able to cultivate over the last couple of seasons. And instead of, well, we took a big swing with Soto and missed, and so we got a couple guys back. This needs to be we took a real swing with a couple guys and we hit, and now we're in the National League Championship Series and we're a couple of wins away from a World Series. There needs to be that type of a progression here out in San Diego, and it's going to be tough. We've talked at length on these previews about how much better I think the Diamondbacks are going to be. And obviously the Dodgers are very good and not going anywhere. But this is now up to the Padres to really take that step and cause some problems in the National League. So those are the teams that are feeling the heat and the most pressure going into the 2025 Major League Baseball season. Let's go back to the Toronto Blue Jays now, as they are the team that I pay the most attention to, so they get a little bit extra attention on these preview episodes. We've looked at guys who could break out, bounce back, and fall off. But now it's the X factors, the guys who could really help decide how this season goes. A very important season, as we just talked about, for the Toronto Blue Jays. So who are the X factors for the Jays going into the going into the 25 season? Let's talk about it. The Toronto Blue Jays are under a lot of pressure this season with a lot of players needing to step up. But they made some moves in the offseason to try to get back to where they think they can be. And while you don't want to put the pressure on too many players, you at least hope that the stars will step up. But what about everyone else? Who could contribute to a big Blue Jay season this year? Going to look at a couple of X factors for the Jays in the 2025 season. We'll begin with Chris Bassett in the starting rotation. I think they need him to be a real strong number 3. You don't want to be relying on 40-year-old Max Scherzer to be a dominant ace type again. I think you want him to just be a number 4. And you don't want to bank on Bowden Francis to just be that guy. And so I think you want to give him a little bit of wiggle room that if he happens to drop down to be a number 5 for a little bit, it's not going to kill you. And so in that spot now, it has to be Chris Bassett, who bit up and down. But if he can be a genuine, real number 3 for the Toronto Blue Jays and be not just he's the 3rd best pitcher because everyone else sucks, but just be a guy who can really be middle of your rotation guy, starting a playoff game and you feel comfortable with it guy, then this turns into one of the best pitching staffs in baseball with Gausman and Barrios, you are assuming, doing their thing at the top. And so we have talked a lot this offseason about how the Blue Jays maybe needed one more starter. Part of that was to build in a little bit of a cushion if Bassett wasn't really that. But if he does stay what he has done, if he can just basically pitch to his baseball reference page, then this stays one of the better pitching staffs in all of baseball. But I think they're really going to need him this season. Jeff Hoffman is the other one. So we're saying pitching in this part of the episode. Anyway, I think they actually have a really good middle relief and set up kind of a situation. Swanson, at the time of this recording, banged up, and we'll see what goes on with him. But 7th inning, 8th inning, to be able to go with Jimmy Garcia and Chad Green, I would like another lefty, but I do think that that they've actually built out a pretty solid bullpen there. Hoffman, if he is an all-star, then this bullpen is a strength for the Blue Jays. And he was just an all-star last year, right? Like, he is capable of doing that. You're not asking Genesis Cabrera to come in and be an all-star. You're just asking an all-star to be an all-star again. If he is that guy, then this is actually a very good bullpen. You can go with Garcia 7th, Green 8th, and all-star closer in the 9th. That's a way to win a lot of ball games and take pressure off of a pitching staff that we talked about before. If he's a dud, and if it's kind of a coming back down to earth a little bit for him, then I just think that's a bit of a setback, because I really don't think that this team does a whole lot when you have Green and you have Garcia moving up into that closer role. At that point, it's a lot of just like mid, and you don't have a lot of confidence in that. And this team can't afford to give any games away this season. So there is a real importance, I think, placed on the closer position this year for the Toronto Blue Jays. And the last X factor here, and this is maybe just being a little bit too easy, any kid stepping up. This offense, we talked about it at length. Springer, Bichette, Guerrero, Santander at the top. You feel good about that. Springer, you have a little bit of a concern. But Bo's going to bounce back. You just know it. Vlad is genuinely one of the best hitters in baseball, and Santander hits the hell out of baseballs. But you are going to need a kid to step up. Kirk is due for a bounce back, as we talked about earlier in the month. But he can't really, I don't think you want him to be your number 5. Also, he is going to be catching a lot this year, and backup catcher sucks on this team. So you are going to need an Orelvis. You're going to need a Barger. You're going to need a Wagner. You're going to need a Loperfido. You're going to need one of those guys to step up and be a real, genuine threat in this offense for them to, I think, have any chance of being a playoff team. Last year, it was just Vladdy hitting tanks with nobody on. This year, you either need to be able to crack into that top 4 and get on for them, or be able to follow that up and turn 1-run innings into 4-run innings with some rallies and help turn that lineup over. So this team needs someone to step up, one of the kids to step up in a big way and be a real X factor in this offense. If they can do that, then this is probably a playoff team. If they can't, then we're probably talking about a bunch of dudes who are in AA right now playing with the Blue Jays by the time August and September roll around. So, again, no pressure, kids. Just all the pressure. The National League takes center stage as the International Series kicks off very soon. And so today we're going to be looking at the win totals of the teams involved in the National League. Let's run through division by division, and we will start with the Philadelphia Phillies. I have them going over their total of 91.5. I love the top of the pitching rotation so much with Nola and Wheeler and what they can do. I think that they have a pretty strong rotation throughout, right? Like 1 through 5, it's very strong. You have the aces kind of at the top with those guys, and then you have the absolute mashing power of this offense with Harper and Turner. Sorry, not Turner, but with Harper and Turner and Schwarber at the top of this lineup. And so I just feel like there is a lot of potential in the Philadelphia Phillies to really kind of break through. I think that it's such a talented team and a group that you really do have to take seriously. And then, like, besides that, like, they add a Max Kepler in free agency, which just kind of fits exactly what they're looking to do. You add maybe a bit of a breakout from Alex Baum, who was involved in a lot of trade talks, but I still think there's some power with him as well. Like, there's just so much pop in this lineup. Castellanos as well, so much pop in this lineup that I just think they're going to be too dangerous to keep down. So I actually have the Phillies winning this division. We're going to go today in order of how I see the divisions lining up. And so this one might be, controversial might be a bit much, but a bit of a surprise. Up next, we have the Atlanta Braves. I think that there is a very talented baseball team there. And I understand they lost Fried, Injuries have been a major issue, and they've set a lot of guys back. But you look at this lineup 1 through 9, and it's just solid, 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 solid. You look at this rotation, and it's solid. Bullpen, so like it's just a solid baseball team. And you know if they're going to be hanging around of the trade deadline, Alex Anthopoulos is going to make 55 moves to try to make this team better. And so I just think that everyone's kind of forgot about the Atlanta Braves. And so I have them finishing second in this division with over 93.5 wins, which means probably need to put a few U's in this one now, and that's where the New York Mets come in. Look, you have an amazing top of your order in Soto, Lindor, and Alonso, and a couple of other guys, some younger pieces that could contribute in real ways. I just don't love where this rotation is at right now. I have some concerns about the bullpen as well. I think that there is a little bit too much relying on best case scenario in this rotation when you are looking at some of the offenses that you're going to have to face in the National League. So I have the Mets going under 90.5. Not significantly under, but under enough that it could be a problem for them here down the stretch. Understanding that this is year one of the Juan Soto contract and the start of what they are trying to build out in New York. Up next in this division, Washington. I have them under 71.5. It's going to be difficult for the bottom two teams in this division against three just absolute powerhouses. And Washington, look, they did what they could in a Juan Soto trade, but they're a ways away from being close right now. Same thing with the Marlins. Like they are the worst team in a really good division. It's a tough spot to be in, and I would be surprised if Alcantara is with this team in August. So I think that this is a real step back season for the Miami Marlins. Let's move now to the Central Division. Up first is the Chicago Cubs. I think this is a very weak division, and I think they got quite a bit better this offseason. I a little frustrated with them just moving on from Bellinger for nothing, and bringing in Kyle Tucker is a great move. I have a little bit of a concern about the pitching rotation, but I still think like this lineup is good, and I think that this is clearly the best team in this division. So I think they go over 85.5 wins this season. The Cincinnati Reds, their total is at 78.5. I have them going over as well. I think that this is a team that has a chance for a real breakout. You have a very talented player, kind of head manning everything. They made a move to improve the pitching staff this season, and I just think they've kind of rounded things out a little bit with some interesting young players. So I think Cincinnati has a chance to be kind of a step above the middle of the pack in the Central Division. Up next is the Milwaukee Brewers. I have them under 83.5. I just think they keep getting worse and worse and worse. And I just feel like the strength was the bullpen. They get rid of Williams. Bringing in Nestor Cortez doesn't fix that. They've lost too much over the years, I think, to be really sustainable in this National League Central, when I think you have the Cubs as a legitimately good team and the Reds as a legitimately dangerous team. Up next is St. Louis. I think this is going to be a fall-off year for them. I think Arenado, if he hasn't been traded by the time you hear this, will be traded at some point throughout the season. They lose Goldschmidt. You need the kids to step up in ways that they just haven't yet. And so I think they still have some intriguing major league pieces, but I think they're going to be out of it to the point at the deadline that reality will have to set in, and they'll have to move on from a few of these guys. So I think that this is a bit of a retool year for the St. Louis Cardinals. And up next, it's Pittsburgh. I have them under 77.5 wins as well. I just, like, Skeens is great. It's a pretty good pitching staff. It's an all right lineup, but it just, unless something develops in a really big way, I just don't see them being able to kind of bust through in any meaningful way this season. But they are one of the teams that have my eye on as I might be really wrong on these guys. We move now to the West, and we start at the top with the Los Angeles Dodgers. They are the only team in Major League Baseball that has a win total projection of over 100 wins. And again, this is based on Vegas ones. I'm sure if I looked at Fangraphs and stuff like that, we might get a couple more. But right now, they are at 103 wins, and I'm taking the over. I just think if anyone falls off, there's so much talent on this team. The pitching staff is absurdly deep, with not just like, oh, wow, that guy's a really good number 4. It's like, no, number 1, number 1, number 1, number 1, number 2, number 1, number 1. They have high-end talent that anyone who puts together a team in a video game would be jealous of, and I don't see how this team has any kind of stretch where, okay, well, that guy's struggling, but this guy can step up. And all right, well, Ohtani had a bad month. Like, he only hit 300, but Michael Conforto was hot this month. And well, I mean, this month, Freddie Freeman was kind of hobbling a little bit, but Max Muncy just hit 10 home runs in June. So there's that. There's just so many other pieces that if one falls off, someone else can kind of pick up. I think Dave Roberts is a really, really good manager, and I don't see this team having much issue this season. Second place, I have the Arizona Diamondbacks. Over 86.5 wins. I love the starting staff with Burns. I get that it wasn't great with Montgomery a season ago, and maybe he is a guy who goes to the bullpen out there, and Rodriguez didn't really step up in the way that they needed him to, but you have that top three at the start of your rotation, you win a lot of baseball games. And I think the top of this lineup is a little bit underrated with Carol Marte, Lourdes Gurriel Jr. They acquired Naylor in the offseason. I think that gives them a really, really strong 1 through 4. And then you know that Moreno can do quite a few things as well. And you have a couple other pieces that might hit, might not. But I think that top 4 is actually really underrated and can do some damage. And enough damage that a very good pitching staff can get you through to at least a wild card spot in the National League. San Diego Padres. I think this last playoff experience in just an absolute rock fight with the Los Angeles Dodgers is enough that you have to think that this team, not that they needed more of a swagger, but I think there's a bit of a proof of concept with them now that they really believe they can go out and make some noise in this National League. And you have a GM that is perpetually aggressive. And so I think that they are going to be close enough that when it comes time for the trade deadline, this team is going to be able to really bolster things up. And I think there is going to be a little bit of what we saw in the American League Central last year, where all these teams just beat the tar out of the Colorado Rockies all year and kind of elevate some of those win totals a little bit. But I do also think that this is a high end version of that, and so there is going to be a little bit of cannibalizing some of the records in this division. The San Francisco Giants are in a tough spot. I have them under 80.5. They finally get their big free agent splash in Willy Adames, but I just don't think he is the game changer that they need for this lineup to be really threatening, and I think they have lost too much in the pitching staff to really compete with some of these staffs that you have to deal with the Dodgers and the Diamondbacks, and the lineup you have to deal with the San Diego Padres. So I still think San Francisco is probably a move or two away from being a real threat in this West Division. And so because of that, and because of the high-level talent you have at the top of this, I just feel like they're going to have a tough time breaking through and being a 500 baseball team this season. And we close out in not dramatic at all fashion with the Colorado Rockies at 58.5 wins. They're going to get beat up so badly this season. They are the White Sox of the National League. It is a bad baseball team, a very poorly run baseball team. And so I think they get just the tar kicked out of them this season in that division. So those are the win total projections for this upcoming season in the National League. So what does this mean now for the playoffs? So I have the Dodgers and the Phillies getting the bye, which means my wild card matchups are the Braves against the Padres and the Cubs against the Diamondbacks. So this is pretty big disappointment, I would say, for the New York Metropolitans, the amazing Mets. But again, I think this is year one of what they are trying to do out there. The one thing that I factored in with a couple of other teams that I didn't give them the credit for is I do think that if they are close at the deadline, they are going to try to take some major swings. And like if they're close and the Blue Jays are falling off, they could just try to trade for Vladdy right then and there. But I think that they're going to need a couple things to hit if they can keep up with some of these other teams. And there is a lot of an assumption that Atlanta can get back to normal in some of these predictions as well. But those are my wild card matchups. Coming out of that, I have Arizona taking on the Dodgers in the National League Division Series and the Braves taking on the Phillies. So the Division Series really takes on its name with a couple inter-division matchups. And then I have in the National League Championship Series, the Dodgers taking on the Atlanta Braves and beating the Atlanta Braves to win the National League Championship and go on to the World Series for the second year in a row. The Major League Baseball season is just about upon us, and we have been previewing it for basically a month now. there's going to be some things I don't get right, but some I'm kind of anticipating a little bit more than others. So here is what I'm worried I'm wrong about going into the 2025 baseball season. The first one, how good the rotations are in Arizona and Seattle. I think both staffs are fantastic and put their teams in really good spots. If there is a fall off from either of those staffs, or if their lineup isn't just not savable, I guess, in any stretch, then I'm going to be quite wrong on both of those teams, and that could shift a few things in both the American and National League. But I just think with the high-end talent both pitching staffs have, Arizona, I have more confidence that they can hit more than Seattle can, but either way, that there is a lot of pressure on both of these teams for me to be right, but also just the pitching staffs I think really need to step up. On the opposite side of that, I'm worried that I'm wrong about Baltimore. I think that this offseason is really going to haunt them. I think that getting worse is not what you want to be, even when you have some exciting young talent that is probably, that their progression is probably going to offset some of the losses that you have. I just don't think that they can do that in the pitching rotation. And so I feel like they wasted opportunity this offseason, and they have some very talented guys. And if like Jackson Holliday takes a big step and Gunnar Henderson just stays awesome along with Adley Rutschman, then maybe it doesn't matter how much they pitch. And this offense just carries them to a American League East title. Like I am worried that I'm overstating how much of a wasted opportunity this offseason was and how much it's going to hurt them. Another one that I'm worried about is just the AL Central, just in general. I don't think that Cleveland and Kansas City can repeat what they did a season ago. I don't think they can do that again. I think Detroit at least has a little bit more sustainability. I think they have the best team in that division, but I don't think Kansas City did not bolster this team in any way. And Cleveland, like we know how they got there last year with a very, very good bullpen, but I don't think they're going to be able to hit enough, and I don't think the starting staff is going to be good enough to get them beyond that spot. But like the reason I'm worried I'm wrong about this is we literally saw it last year, and we saw that it could work. I just feel like more of baseball and more in the American League is a lot better around them. And because of that, I think that there is going to be a falling off from both of those teams, but I could absolutely be wrong on that. And just that the pitching is not as bad as I think it is out in Kansas City, and maybe they get a little bit more offense than I think, and Cleveland gets a lot better pitching than I think, and a little bit better offense than I think they're going to get, and that powers them to another playoff spot. So I'm worried I'm going to be wrong on that one as well. And then Pittsburgh's breakout being a year away still. Like, I still think they need more talent, but I could be wrong on that. Like, maybe the pitching staff just overall is better than I think it is behind the scenes, and maybe the offense steps up in a way that I am not necessarily anticipating. And so because of that, I am, and again, like that division's wide open, so it might not even take a big step forward for me to be wrong on the Pittsburgh Pirates this year, which terrifies me when we're making predictions like that. So those are the things that I'm worried I'm wrong about in Major League Baseball this year. Now let's go to in and out for the Major League Baseball playoffs. I know we all would like to think that progression is linear, and playoff teams that made it last year can very easily make it again this year, but that's not always the case. And so I'm looking at 3 teams to fall out, which means I'm looking at 3 new teams to get into the playoff picture this year. Let's take a look, shall we? Ta-da. Thought the intro was longer there. So these are the baseball teams that I think are going to fall out of the playoff race from last season. We'll begin with the National League Central champion Milwaukee Brewers. I just think they keep getting better. And I don't see how they are better than the Cubs this year. Sorry, they just keep getting worse, is what I meant to say. And I don't see how they beat out the Cubs this year. And then I certainly don't see how they compete for a wild card spot in baseball this season. I just think each offseason, they just get a little bit worse and a little bit worse and a little bit worse. And that is not how you sustain things in a division where a couple of teams got, I think, better. So I feel like Milwaukee falls out. And then we just talked about it in the Worried I'm Wrong, but it's Cleveland and it's Kansas City. Cleveland, it's a wild ride that got them to the American League Championship Series a season ago. I don't think any aspect of their team is playoff ready aside from a really good bullpen. So I don't think that this team has what it takes in a more competitive American League this season. And Kansas City, like they just, I don't think they did enough. With a team that was fringe anyway, and a lot of good teams getting better, I feel like Kansas City, even if a couple of their guys have a better season, like they could just in totality have a better season and lose more games because of the improvements that have been made in the American League. So I think they are the team, or one of the teams that falls out. Now, for the teams that get into the playoffs, we'll start with the one that takes Milwaukee's place. It's Arizona. I just think the Diamondbacks with Burns, the starting rotation got a lot stronger. And so I think that they are a team getting into the playoffs in the National League this year. Obviously, it's not a straight line taking Milwaukee's spot, but I just think they're the best candidate to move into a playoff spot in the National League. In the American League, two teams falling out, so two teams got to go in, and they're both from different divisions than the two teams that we have falling out in Cleveland and Kansas City. Boston, I just think that the rotation additions they made are so strong, and that is going to be able to, with a good offense that they have, be able to get this team back into playoff contention. And we talked about it in the Worried I'm Wrong, but I'm putting a lot of chips in on Seattle this year. With the pitching staff that they have, I think Julio Rodriguez can step up and be an all-star caliber player again, and I just think that with the pitching rotation should get them into a playoff spot. So those are my MLB playoffs in and out. Now it is time to kind of put the money where the mouth is. It is time to preview the American League, looking at the win totals as set by Las Vegas, Nevada. It's time for our American League season preview. Didn't get me that time. The baseball season is just, it started, but for the American League, just hours away at this point. So we're going to run through the win-loss projections from Vegas for every team in the American League this year. We're going to do it by division, and we're going to do it in order of how I see them finishing. So we'll begin with the Yankees at the top of the American League East. They have enough depth on offense. They lost Soto, but added, I think, quite a bit. You have a pitching rotation that can be really dangerous if everyone is healthy, and they really improved that bullpen. So I just think every aspect of this team is complete. I think they get comfortably, honestly, over 91.5 wins this season. And I think that they are going to be aggressive in trying to address any issues that may arise for this team. The Boston Red Sox are second. If that rotation can hold up this year, then this is a really, really good baseball team, and one that I think gives the Yankees a lot of real pressure. If Crochet is awesome, if Buehler can be a bit of a Yankee killer like he was in the playoffs, and if Bregman still has a good year out in Boston, then this is a dangerous, dangerous Red Sox team. So I have them over 86.5. The Orioles, we talked about them and Worried I'm Wrong. I don't love the rotation. This is such a talented lineup, but that rotation against an improved all-around Yankees lineup, an improved Red Sox lineup, a Jays lineup that you have to assume is going to be better this year. I just don't think this team gets to the 90-win mark. And so their win total is 87.5. I think they go under it. Not substantially, but I think they go under that. The Toronto Blue Jays, their total is at 78.5. I have them going over. I think that they are going to be desperate. I think they'll be a team that will be adding at the deadline. And so I think that gets them above 500 going into throughout this season. The Tampa Bay Rays. I know they're the Rays, but they're going to be playing basically the whole season on the road. And we saw with the Blue Jays in the pandemic seasons that's just very difficult to deal with. So I think Tampa Bay takes a pretty big step back this year at under 81.5. Let's go to the Central, the Detroit Tigers. I think there's actually quite a bit of talent on this team. I don't think they sell 2 years in a row if they're close at the deadline. And I think they're the most talented team in the American League Central. So I have them going over 83.5. The Twins totals at 84.5. I have them going over as well. I think they have a few guys who will have some bounce back seasons this year, and they'll be able to kind of squeak over that number. Kansas City, I just don't think they did enough to add to what was a fringe playoff team a season ago, and only a fringe playoff team because the competition was a bit down in the American League. I think some of those teams are on the rise, and I just think Kansas City falls behind, so I have them under 83.5. I think the Cleveland Guardians also go under 82.5. I just don't think they can replicate what they did a season ago. I think they are primed for quite a few steps back, and I don't see this being a very threatening team in the Central at all. And then the White Sox are just a really bad baseball team, and they're probably going to get worse as the season goes on. So any number you could have put out there, I would have gone under. 53.5 is really low, and I think they clear it. Out west, the Seattle Mariners. I have them winning the division with over 84.5 wins. I love the rotation. I think Julio Rodriguez has a bounce back year, and I think they get to a very good baseball team this season. I think it all kind of rounds into form for Seattle this year, so I like them over 84.5. The Houston Astros, I have them under 87.5. Again, it's a good team. It's not a great team. And I think there's a couple of teams that improve in the American League this year that, again, push the Astros down a little bit further and a little bit further. Texas Rangers, they're a good team. And so I have them going over 87.5 wins. They had some injuries last year. I think they bounce back, and I think they cause a lot of chaos in the National League West, in the American League West. I think they're going to give Seattle a real run for their money, and Houston a real run for their money. And then you get the two other teams in this division. You have the Angels at 71.5. I think they get a little bit healthier and maybe a little bit better and surprise some teams. So I do think they actually clear 71.5. And then the Athletics. Again, it's a full season on the road, basically. I think it's going to be tough. I think they did a good job adding, but not this good of a job. I think this is still a team that loses 100 games this year. So I have them under 71.5. So now, what does that mean for my playoff picture? It means I have the Yankees and Mariners getting the bye through the wild card round. In the wild card round, I have Detroit taking on the Baltimore Orioles, and I have Boston taking on the Texas Rangers. Coming out of that, I have Baltimore against Seattle in the American League Division Series, and Boston against New York in the other ALDS. Going to the ALCS, I have the Yankees taking on the Seattle Mariners. I just think that pitching staff is enough to get them through, but it's chalky, and I understand it's chalky. I have the Yankees winning. So again, it's the World Series that Fox will drool over. Yankees, Dodgers, and it goes the same way. The Dodgers are just the most complete team in all of baseball right now. I don't see them doing anything that would have them falling off and not be the favorites to win the World Series. So they are my World Series pick for 2025. I understand it is boring. I just can't go against what I think will actually happen. So that is it for the MLB season preview this year.